I want to take a few minutes to introduce Scott here. Of course, most of Scott's career need no introduction. So I'll try to take as little time as possible. But for some of you, it might be interesting to learn that among a lot of other things Scott still does, he's also chairman for Weighing, a social engagement creation platform. Scott also continues to drive his passion for education through Kariki. And Scott and I discussed the potential Huawei enterprise participation in that organization. I also want to just take a minute to thank Scott to agree to be here. When we decided to approach Scott, we thought he would be open to the idea based on his belief in true competitive business, and he did. Now it's my honor to introduce and give the floor to Scott McNealy.
Thanks. Nice to be back in front of the reseller gang again. It's been a while. Any former Sun resellers in the room? 1, 2. That's not bad. We didn't do a lot of networking equipment, so it doesn't surprise me totally. But first of all, thanks, Jane. I really appreciate the opportunity. Being a recovering CEO, they don't give me the microphone as much as they used to. So any chance I get, I'm happy to go do it. Keeping very busy these days. Chairman of Weigh-In. We started it in Denver. I made the mistake the first time of starting a company in California. I won't do that again. It's ranked 50 out of 50 states. Can't get worse than that. So we're out of here, and very happy with that decision. But and I'm also spending a lot of time consulting to any company that'll last. My fees are not terribly high. And spending a lot of time on Kariki. Kariki, just so you know, is a K-12 education website that offers free open source resources. We've become the largest repository worldwide. We have almost 50,000 learning assets that are free and open source on the web. And we've basically become the go-to site if you want to not spend $130 on a third grade math textbook that will break your kid's back, and nothing's changed in it since Newton got hit on the head with an apple. So we were trying to go after the up to $15 billion a year ripoff of curriculum materials annually spent just in the US alone. Think about that. That's just the US. I'll go globally, and it's a stunning number. And I can talk more about that later, but the reason I wanted to spend a couple of seconds on that is I want to thank Huawei for a very generous donation to this .org, this nonprofit, Kariki, for my being here. I think that's just a wonderful way of being a local citizen and doing something for the planet too, because this is a global website. And in fact, we get an enormous number of visitors from all around the world, every country basically. So I want to thank Huawei and Jane for their support of one of my passions, which is to fix one little part of the education issues we all know and love here in this country. So when we started Sun, I'm going to sound like an old guy because I'll do some history, but history does tend to repeat itself. But I remember when we started Sun, we were all scared to death of Japan Inc. and the Keiretsus or Zaibatsus or whatever they had there. It was just going to dominate. They were going to take over everything. And I grew up in Detroit, so I saw what they did to I remember my dad was Group Vice President of North American Marketing for American Motors. Remember the Gremlin, the Matador, the Javelin, the Pacer. There were a lot of really cool cars that came out back when I was in Detroit. And I remember he came one day and he said, "Oh my gosh, He said, I saw a car that blew me away. He said it was a Honda Civic. And that was the first earliest Honda Civic, which makes the smart car look big. But he said the craftsmanship, the capabilities of this car, the price point, all the rest of it was, and sure enough, he called it. And you know, they got smoked by the Japanese car makers. Well, I remember when we started Sun, and everybody was saying, oh, they're gonna go smoke the computer industry. And I remember the first thing we did is we headed to Japan and said, well, we're gonna find out whether we can compete globally in Japan rather than wait for them to show up in the US. And we did, and we got knocked around, but they trained us on quality. And once we established our ability to compete quite well in Japan, which we did very early, it was actually pretty easy to go out and compete on a global basis. Well, so I've seen Japan. I think China's a different deal. I think they're a very, very powerful force, much larger, no island mentality. They're much more willing to go out and make deals and cut deals and do deals and get on an airplane. So I think they're going to be a very different force. Just in the vast size, the sheer number. There's more English speakers in China than there are in the United States. Go figure. And everything that they do, they can do. Somebody said you could outfit 10, I don't know if it's accurate, but just you could outfit 10 NBAs with all 7-footers from China. There's just that many people who are over 7 feet in China. I mean, all the numbers of scale, the scale numbers are pretty interesting when you look at them. They still suck at hockey. I'm on the board of, another job is I'm on the board of the San Jose Sharks, so I'll be heading out of here fairly quickly after the talk here to go see us beat LA. So. I love the sign, it says free Rafi. Anyhow, but another passion of mine, as you might know, is golf. Having been, until I retired as CEO, I've had about a 6-year run as the lowest handicap on the Fortune 500 Golf Digest CEO list. So that's another big passion of mine. And I've got a son of mine who's going to start at Stanford next year on the Stanford golf team. And he's got 3 other brothers who hit it farther and better than he does coming up behind him. So we'll see how that works out. But China has figured it out. Tianyan, how do you say his name? Lang? Guanten Lang, I think was his name, the little 14-year-old who made the cut. Holy mackerel, you know, just wait. That's going to spark an unbelievable run of golf in China. I got to believe everybody was just going nuts in China for that particular. I thought it was rather cruel and unusual, and I guess China's going to have to get used to it here, there, and everywhere, that the entire field played in threesomes on a perfectly manicured course with marshals everywhere, caddies carrying their bags and raking their traps, never having to look for a lost ball. And it still took them over 6 hours as threesomes to play. Every player took over 6 hours. So what do? They fine the 14-year-old for playing slow. I don't know whether it's because he was Chinese or not, but I thought they should have fined the entire field 5 strokes each, just to be fair, if you can't finish a round of golf in under 3.5 hours. But anyhow, I digress. Why are we here? We're here to talk about resellers, the golf. You want to talk about golf? Yeah. What do you think of the ban on the anchored putt? Well, never mind. First of all, technology has the shelf life of a banana, and I think that's the most important single big rule. Sort of like it's Moore's law said a little more cleverly, I think. And that basically says things are going to change above, below, and around you faster in this industry than anything. I love there's a Coke right there, right? Remember when they launched New Coke? And the world said, no, we're not going to do it. And they, a couple years later, said, all right, we'll come back to the old Coke. Can you imagine? We're going to go back to the old Commodore computer. You're not allowed to go back. It's a very, very different business model than that. The second point I would like to make is that controversy is okay. And my view on controversy is that's your only opportunity at a win. If everybody thinks it's the right thing to do, everybody does it. If everybody does it, there's no differentiation. If there's no differentiation, there's no pricing power. If there's no pricing power, you don't have a business because you don't make money. So now, there's some of you who are thinking, hooking up with Huawei might be a little controversial. Right? That's actually pretty good. There's a business opportunity there. Now the problem is if it's controversial and wrong, you look stupid. But if it's controversial and you're right, and the bigger the controversy and the bigger the market, the bigger the opportunity here. So this is what you all have to figure out is there a pony in here? Because I certainly smell the controversy, if you know what I mean, to mix a couple metaphors there. Okay. So think about how quickly things have changed. And just in my lifetime, we've gone through mainframes and mini computers and workstations and network servers and PCs and the internet and the cloud and virtualization. And on the computer side, when we started, Europe had a player in every country. UK had ICL, France had Bull. They still do. Olivetti has was in Italy. They got other problems now. Siemens and Nixdorf and all. They were all major players. We had the bunch: Burroughs, Unisys, NCR, CDC, and Honeywell. These are names that are all gone. Heck, we even had DG, DEC, Apollo. Remember Sun? And you certainly see that in the equipment business, as AT&T used to be the #1 provider with the Bell Labs research and all the rest of it, and now that's fundamentally, you have Alcatel merged with Lucent, and Nokia, 3Com, HP, Cisco, Juniper, and probably the two hottest technology growth environments are Huawei and Arista, which is my good buddy Andy Bechtelsheim off doing yet another thing. If you guys were smart, you'd hire him. Probably the smartest guy. What Steve Jobs was to consumer fashion in technology, Andy Bechtelsheim is to industrial technology and computers and switching, and he is the walking convergence of ICT. He really is. I mean, if you ever get a chance to sit down and talk to him, you'll know in 5 minutes exactly how true that last statement was. Anyhow, I'm going to race through a couple of other thoughts here and then really open it up for Q&A, because I would like to try and answer your questions and hopefully be entertaining and useful at the same time. I love resellers. I grew up, as I said, in the auto industry, and I saw firsthand car manufacturers didn't own their dealers. So I just thought that was the way it worked. I ate cereal, and Kellogg's used retailers. I really thought that was the model. And it just seems awfully natural to me that that's how you would do it. We tended to do things differently in the technology space because IBM made silicon and went all the way through to the end user. HP tried to copy that model. DEC did that same model, and that was very different from just about every other industry. Now, I don't know why they thought they were special, but they did, and they did it differently. I also noticed something that was very interesting, and why I like to hang around dealers. The car guys all worked 90, 100 hours a week, and made kind of very low salaries and didn't own any of the company. And the dealers all had cars and boats and airplanes and fourth homes, and at least in the car dealers, still true. I mean, look at the car dealers. I don't know how they did that, but they were always the ones making all the money. Somehow that hasn't played out as well in the, I see you all looking, so we're not car dealers. It hasn't played out as well in the technology space, and I think it really should, because I really want to look at this chart here, and the reason why, and I've donated this chart to Huawei, and I don't know who did the analysis, but that little S-curve there, some PhD for some project or something. Bill Reducial gave me this chart, my former CTO, and it shows that basically if you hit your 100% satisfaction, then you get 100% willingness to pay. If you can exceed satisfaction by 15%, you can get 150% willingness to pay. And if you miss by 15%, it drops very, very aggressively. Now the problem with manufacturers, for a Huawei or whatever, they're building for a global market. It's very unlikely that one size fits all. It can get close, but it's probably going to need some work, some touch-up, some value add, some other pieces, some other integration, whatever, to get to that 100% or 150% or 115% satisfaction. And therefore, you can see if you can get to that 115% by adding the extra little pieces, it makes it much easier for the manufacturer to provide a lower cost 85% solution that the reseller then carries forward and carries forward very nicely. And that's ultimately the reason why resellers are so critical for a global technology OEM. IBM has a different strategy, which I could get into in detail, having competed with that. But I love resellers. They were a huge, huge play for us. And I'll tell you a story that was one of the many mistakes I made at Sun. I mean, a lot of them. Did some things right. Did better than most. One of the bigger mistakes was we actually ran Route D on Sun OS. And we were the router for the internet in the early 80s. Only I was the knucklehead CEO who really didn't understand there was a router business. Nobody did, right? Except a couple of people figured it out, and I can't remember their names, and they started Cisco. And they took the business away because we had big computers where we took the monitor off and ran Route D on Sun OS, and it was, about twice as much plastic and sheet metal as you needed to go run a router. And if I had to go back and do one mistake over again, I might have just kind of split out a part of the engineering and said, you build routers and go hard. And we could have been Cisco and Sun Microsystems, but that's looking backwards. But there was another big mistake. I actually wasn't in the room when this happened. I was told about it, but a former head of operations for the company called his team in, and this was right in the beginning of the bubble in the late 90s when the thing really took off. We had the Y2K thing going, and the internet explosion and all the rest of it. And we were growing like crazy. We were adding 4,500 people a month or a quarter. I can't remember. I think it was 4,500 a quarter we were adding. It was, that was our bozo invasion. You can't do quality at that kind of number. But he put in front of his staff, he put the income statement up and he said, guys, what's our biggest expense out there? And everybody's going, material costs, sales. Everybody had their different answer. He kept saying, no. And finally, he said, the number one expense for us on our expense is discounts to the resellers. And everybody said, if you say so. Because he did the math. He said, look, this is, we pay, 35% discounts to the resellers on a big chunk of our business. We just get rid of the resellers and go direct. So that's when we started hiring all these people getting sales offices. We actually rented a sales office and signed a lease on an entire skyscraper in San Francisco that was never built. We paid off the lease when the bubble burst, to give you an idea how big a mistake we made. But we ended up hiring all these sales and service and administrative and leases and all the rest of it that literally cost us $1.5 to $2 billion probably when the bubble burst. Now, if instead we had said, holy mackerel, let's get out of every lease we can out in the field. Let's transfer every employee we can in the field to the resellers. And the resellers would have gotten smoked, but here's the difference is resellers actually are far more nimble and capable of finding something else to sell if there's a glut of, and there were more gray market sun boxes, so the resellers couldn't do anything because the gray market had so many of those. If we had done that, it would have literally been a game changer for us. So that was one of the biggest mistakes we ever made was, and by the way, the resellers have a much better understanding of what's going on in the marketplace, and if we asked them if you need any more orders, they would have been far different than our sales guys who were just stuffing this stuff out there into the customer base and telling them, long lead times, stock up. And then that all turned into the gray market. So I've been burned by not leaning on the resellers, and I think there's a pretty good understanding here of Huawei that needs to happen. The other opportunity here I see was with Huawei and their broad product line. I've been complaining about what I call Frankenstein data centers forever. And I don't just mean the computers, I mean the networking environments, all the rest of it. And that's where the CIO is not a chief information officer, but is a chief infrastructure and integration officer. And so Andy Bechtolsheim is very bright, and we decided to hire him as our chief hardware architect. All of the other computer science and electrical engineering majors out of all the great schools are therefore didn't get hired to do that job, so they go to a bank on Wall Street or they go to a big consumer packaged goods company and they go in and become CIO and say, well, I'll show them, I'm going to build a better computer architecture than Andy. And most of the CIOs over the last 20, 30 years came out of a computer science or an engineering background, and they were just not quite good enough. I can say this now because I don't really sell to CIOs. They just weren't good enough to cut it at the computer companies in design, so they go in but they're way better than the CEO at computer design, so they can pull the wool over their eyes and go in there and design. And that's the challenge, and that's why you got all of these things that look like Frankenstein with bolts sticking out and scars here and all the rest of it. And the problem with Frankenstein 1.0 is that within 18 months, Frankie needs a redo, starting to smell bad. And what do? The knee vendor is no longer in business. The hip vendor was bought by Oracle and shut down. Every body part is now different and now inoperable and all that. And you can't migrate from 1.1 to 2.0 or whatever. You have to completely restart all over with Frankenstein, and that's the challenge of going with piece part vendors. And I think the customers are starting to get to that. And if they want to do even if they want to do their own private enterprise cloud, they don't want to build a Frankenstein. And I think having a full service vendor can help out a lot. The R&D budget is quite staggering. Sun was a $2 billion a year R&D spender, and I thought we did pretty well, spent that pretty well. And I think we were top 40 R&D spenders worldwide, all industries, so whether it was aerospace, pharmaceuticals, whatever, we were in the top 40 R&D spenders worldwide. The Huawei budget is nearly 2x the R&D spend that we had at our peak at Sun, and their R&D budget is growing. So that's a fairly, You can decide whether this is a controversial strategy or a no-brainer strategy. Do you want to be representing that kind of R&D girth and capability? The other thing that R&D strategy gives you is a homogeneous and consistent architecture. Now, I haven't looked at their product line to know whether they're doing the right top-down architecture across the board, but I did get a chance to watch Cisco go out and buy lots of little companies, and the challenge, it was very successful, far more successful than Sun Microsystems, so I'm not tossing stones, but I do know that it created an enormous challenge for the Cisco iOS to try and put all of this together and not have it be a hairball spaghetti code thing when you're buying all these little pieces to make it all work together. Now it created a lot of opportunity for the resellers to add that value to one size doesn't fit all, but it's hard to keep a consistent architecture around APIs, around interoperability, network interoperability, around user interface, systems management, the security and authentication pieces, all of that went into that. It's just hard to keep when the sources are from 50 different companies and cultures and architectures and strategies, it gets very, very complicated. With that R&D budget, Huawei actually has the chance to go do it right and do it integrated and do it in a way where all of the pieces feel like they came from the same designer. The next piece of it that I think the reseller environment just makes so much better is that if you look at technology and product companies versus reseller distribution retailing companies, the organization charts are entirely different, and you can't organize both ways. Either you organize like we did at Sun or Huawei does around product and technology, and then sell through lots of channels, one set of products through lots of channels, or you're a retailer where you organize by market and geography, and you sell lots of products to specific markets or geographies. And so who you have report to the CEO and how the staff meeting looks is very different at Walmart than it is at Intel. And the beauty and the natural partnership here for Huawei is that they can organize around products and technologies while the resellers organize around markets and geographies. And so there's a very natural partnership here. I'll share you a war story of another interesting moment in time, and that was we were using IBM as a major reseller. In fact, they were our #1 reseller for a long, long time. And I was always a little nervous about it, but it was working great. And they were pushing us, and they were supporting us, and they were a big, big customer, and we were training them up, all the rest of it. And all of a sudden, one day, they stopped becoming a good friend. They were going in and offering trade-outs for all of our equipment to put in IBM power systems. Like overnight, all of a sudden, every one of our accounts, we were under attack from IBM. So I ended up at one of these CEO self-help events, and the CEO of IBM at the time was there. And I had a cocktail and went over to him, and I said, Fred, I won't give you his name, but I said, Fred, I said, you were a great reseller partner. You were, all of a sudden, and before I could finish the question, he just said, we got big enough. I said, touche, thanks, bye. And, end of conversation, it's game on. And that was what I feared. It was what I knew was an inevitability. I just wanted to go verify it because IBM Global Services is IBM. And they want to be that big gorilla, and they were gonna bring their weak sister product company in also along the way, because they were not giving up on computers and on servers. They are still a mainframe company also. You don't see that dichotomy. Huawei is not an integration. They are not going to compete with you. They are not going to use you until they get big enough and then take you out from that distribution. At least probably not in your lifetime. I'm not in the Huawei strategy meetings, but I don't think you have that same risk that we were facing with IBM here with Huawei. I think it's a much more natural partnership and one that you should consider there. Again, I just wouldn't ignore a tier 1 China player. I don't know how you do. The world is getting smaller and a lot smaller than some politicians might think it is. And I think all of Washington has to get on there in their airplane and not grandstand and look for votes, but actually I probably have more Chinese immigration stamps on my passport than Congress combined. So I probably spent more time in front of their ministers combined. I'm guessing, I don't know, and they'll probably yell at me if I say that, but I think we need to go figure that out. So having said all of that, I think there's some big opportunities that are quite explosive. I think the whole video thing is huge. I think after the Boston Marathon, there are going to be cameras everywhere. And that's a big opportunity for you all and Huawei. And I think that's easily the biggest one. I started screaming about that 15 years ago when we were doing UltraSpark. I said, guys, gals, video's coming. Let's make Spark the best video. And they didn't do it. But next big market I see is trading floors. The world is going to a bid-ask world. List price goes away everywhere. And that's what Amazon is doing. That's what eBay did. That's what goes on Wall Street. And it's happening everywhere. So figuring out, and so getting real-time, low latency, straight-through processing with a combination of ICT is a big opportunity. Obviously, big data and analytics, that's not new. He didn't donate to Curricula to have me come in and say, hey, big data is a big deal. But that's, again, going to require very, very integrated networking and computing to go make that happen. I think healthcare is going to be, entertainment, everybody's all over that, but I think healthcare is still number one on Maslow's hierarchy. If you don't have your health, you don't have anything. And I had our family doctor, he was over our house last night for dinner, and we had a very interesting conversation about how many sensing devices there are. We think about electronic data records. You know what those are? That's all that stupid stuff you fill out before you go in with your insurance and the x-rays from 3 years ago, all this stupid stuff that doesn't matter. And they call that like your medical records, your electronic medical. The heck with that. I want to know I want the cloud, I want the medical cloud actually monitoring my heart rate, my respiration, my blood sugar levels, my chemistry, all kinds of stuff in real time. And I want a nice graph on each of the key indicators and whether I'm in the green zone, the yellow zone, or the red zone. And I want to be able to go to that anytime from my iPad. In real time. And if you think about how many, and if you just start talking to your doctor buddies about what they can do for diabetics and monitoring their blood sugar in real time, what they do for heart patients to monitor in real time, and it's all going through the iPhone and through Bluetooth and all the rest of it, smart toilets, all kinds of things that are going to happen out there in real time and give you a set of instructions. Go take these supplements now, go take this, go, have a cheesecake, or you can see the impact of the bender you were on last night. Your life expectancy just dropped 4 days with that one bender. But I think this is a huge, huge market opportunity that is going to drive exactly the kind of integrated cloud computing and component architectures that I think Huawei and other vendors are all going to have to get to, because that's going to be a big deal. I also think that the appliance, the reference architecture, is a real value add that you could bring to Huawei, and that is build out reference architectures for private enterprise clouds based on OpenStack or any of the other architectures that you want to bring, because they don't have time and energy to go do reference architectures here in this geography for the different markets that you are all in. And I think there's a real value add there to simplify all of that. So anyhow, that's just a random set of rants and raves and all the rest of it on different topics, just to kind of get you to think about. You know, this is a decision. It's not one you want to get into lightly, because you're going to have to ramp up and gear up and train up and invest in this kind of a partnership for the long term. And I think this is certainly one that's legitimate and worthy of considering. Any questions, comments, thoughts, any topic? Yes.
Yeah. I want to know your handicap index right now.
My handicap index right now is I'm on the disabled list. I've got a bum shoulder, so I can't play, but I'm a very good caddy. And yeah, I just carry it on the right shoulder, and so I'll be caddying a lot for my son. He'll be playing in the U.S. Junior Amateur, and he's playing in the Cal Amateur, and he missed by one. We tried to get through stage one of the U.S. Open qualifier, and he missed by one. And in the last hole, he chipped up, and the chip hit the edge of the cup and rolled away, or we would have potentially been going to stage two. And he could have been the 17-year-old Chen Yang Wang, whatever he is.
So I guess that means you don't get to play hockey anymore either.
I don't play anymore. I coach. My four boys all are junior Sharks. My oldest is timed out now. And I coached. I was assistant coach on. I don't want to be head coach. You don't want to deal with the parents in youth hockey. Shareholders are bad enough, but let me tell you, they're nothing like hockey parents. So I do a lot of that. Plus, I'm on the Sharks board, and we had 3 of the Sharks players over for dinner last night. So the boys are like. So we're very tight with the hockey community here in California. So that keeps me busy. Yes.
So speaking of hockey, do you think Detroit is going to be Blackhawks?
Yes, Detroit's going to smoke the Blackhawks.
So that too, Frank is going to be.
No, I already told him that. So yeah.
Coming off the hockey for a second, now one of the things regarding the healthcare you mentioned earlier, what do you think of the Healthcare Act, quote unquote?
Well, sorry, so now you've launched me. I have a big button here that says push me, and you found it. Jane and I were talking about how China is hurtling towards free enterprise, and we're hurtling towards planned economies. And we're hurtling towards 50% of the GDP into the public sector, or government sector as I call it. It's not the public sector. Anytime you hear the word public anything, replace it with the word government. Government schools, government broadcasting system, government loans. I mean, these are, and if you hear them say affordable loans, they're not, they're unaffordable loans, right? And if it's called the Affordable Health Care Act, it is the Unaffordable Health Care Act. It is, we won't be able to afford this thing, it's gonna be a disaster. But the basic problem I have is, and even China is seeing what's happening, is that the private sector executes far more efficiently, effectively, aggressively, progressively than the government sector. The government sector prosecutes everything in a democracy with corruption, inefficiency, ineffectiveness, everything, including war. But that doesn't mean I'm an anarchist, and I don't think we should have government. Somebody's got to run it. We need one court system. We need one State Department. We need one Defense Department. There's definitely activities that are national government, kinds of things. But we have way overstepped. We have not scope creep, but it's scope, light speed in terms of what our government is doing, and they shouldn't be insurance, they shouldn't be in education, and they shouldn't be in healthcare. All three of those things are very important to me. I don't want the government politicians getting involved in those things, and education would be far better off if it was a private sector decision and we have apprenticeships. Instead of trying to teach everybody how to go to college, we should be teaching everybody how to get a job. You know, teach everybody how to be a plumber, and then take those that are the brightest and take them to college. They'll be just fine. Trust me. Right? And then everybody will have a job. Not that they should all be plumbers, but you understand what I'm saying, is get everybody's skills so they can at least go out and have a job, and then take the bright ones and send them to college, and then teach them all this stuff they teach at college. So I think the healthcare thing is just scary as all get out. I think the statistics show that everybody comes here for healthcare, and I think that we have a total lack of individual responsibility. We have a victimization perspective here in America. And I don't think it takes a village to raise a child. I'd like to start with a couple of biological parents, and then friends and family if that fails, and then the local community if that fails. I went and looked, and we started the Department of Education in 1980. You should see the graph of how fast spending in education has risen, and our scores are down slightly since 1980. It is a stunning graph if you look at it. That's the first thing you do, is shoot the Department of Education and then start taking out all of the other ones, and tell people, you know, if you're going to have kids, take care of them. And if not, we're coming after you. Because it's your responsibility. That's the birth control I'd like to see. Right? I understand, I would be evangelizing how expensive it is to put a kid through high school. You make it free. In fact, I'll pay you. You know, I didn't need to be paid to have sex. You know, I can do it for free. You know? And so I look at all of the disasters that the government is, and I mean, there's all kind. I mean, you can see what happens the bigger the government. CEOs in the United States are scared out of their mind to speak up against our government now. Do you think Jeff Immelt can say anything negative about the administration in public? He does what percentage? 60% of his business, maybe, in the 40 to 60%. I don't know what the number is, but it's a massive number in the government sector. He can't say anything negative. He's the most powerful CEO, right? Do you think the General Motors CEO can say anything negative? How about anybody on Wall Street? Do they dare say anything? How about, here's what I asked in a tweet. I said, can we just ask the top 10,000 donors to the Republican Party over the last 10 years and the top 10,000 donors to the Democratic Party over the last 10 years? And I'd like to see each year what the audit rates were from the IRS for those donors. Wouldn't you like to see that analysis? And you can very quickly adjust for, you know, wealth of donor, you know, to get it statistically significant. What are the chances that I've been audited the last 4 years that is an accident, given that I was a huge Romney supporter? I hope it's an accident. But after the last few weeks, actually, I was telling my wife over the last few years, I'm getting targeted. They did find one thing in all of those audits, and that is we went to a charity auction and paid our money, and we won. The auction, you know, a raffle. We didn't use the stuff because we didn't want it. It was like a, you know, a 4-night stay in Milpitas or something like that. Well, my wife, bless her heart, never thought that we would actually have to declare that as winnings, as earnings, and they found that. And it was like, they charged us $15,000 for it when it was a $2,000 value that we didn't, that would have had, I mean, it was unbelievable. And it took us months and months and months to clear this all. That's the only thing they found that we did wrong. Guilty. Guilty of trying to, so I said, Susan, that's the last time we're going to do a charity auction. If that's what we want, that's what we got. So do I want them into healthcare? Absolutely not. That's the last thing I want. And you're going to see this thing just absolutely be a very, very devastating to our economy. I mean, look at, it's not 7.5% unemployment, gang. You got to look at the total unemployment numbers. If I ever reported numbers as a CEO of a public company that were as crooked as the numbers the government reports, first of all, it's wrong, and then as misleading, I'd be in the slammer forever. And you know what? It's both of them. It's the Republicans and the Democrats. Some are worse than others. And you know, this is so, no, I don't like the Unaffordable Health Care Act at all. Yes.
What's going to happen in your speech? What's your thoughts on your speech?
Meg Whitman is a very bright lady, wonderful lady, very high integrity. That's not going to get fixed overnight. That was a big mess, and boards matter, leaders matter. And I think they had a really interesting, what has come out is that when they chose Leo as the CEO, half the board never interviewed him. And the half that did interview him never went and asked his previous employer why he got fired. Can you imagine more dereliction of duty than that? So, but that's the board that's been in charge. I mean, that's just one instance, but that kind of stuff, you know, the leaks and all that. I mean, it's set an enormous amount of swirl inside the company that's not good. And so, I think they've cleaned up the act. They've got a solid board on there right now. They've got a great leader in Meg. They've got a lot of assets, and the problem is the world's ripping along at 800 miles an hour, and they'll have their challenges. But if I were a betting person, I'd bet on Meg. So we'll see.
Well, Andy, I see, Arista is also sitting on Open Compute. What do you think about Open Huawei? What's your thoughts on that?
Open Huawei?
Open Huawei. He's open Compute for the Facebook initiative with Intel. He's the chairman for that.
Yeah.
So
I like open hardware. We open source the Spark. We open source the Spark microprocessor architecture, because hardware is nothing more than zeros and ones anyhow. I mean, it's just code that you then put into a fab, and out comes chips. It's all software. So open sourcing all of that. I just believe in sharing. I think that would be a good thing for Huawei to consider. You don't open source everything. You don't have to, but by sharing and providing interoperability, which open source does, it lowers the barriers to exit, so you don't make as much money. I mean, Apple makes Microsoft look open. But if you can get the market to tip to your environment and be closed, you can make a lot of money, and they have. And I'm a raging capitalist, more power to them. I was a good capitalist. Larry Ellison's a great capitalist. Right? And this is something that I think every company needs to try and figure out. Do you want to be a good capitalist, or do you want to be a great one? Only a couple get to be great. And they don't necessarily move the ball forward. I'm sorry, Apple has not moved the ball forward much. They made it fashionable. They made it a little easier to use, but there's not a lot of great innovation there. There are some business model innovations like iTunes, but fundamentally now we're all listening to lower fidelity music on really crappy headphones. But we're doing it all the time, and I'm not sure that's raised global productivity terribly. So I believe in open hardware. I think and I think all of the major players sort of owe to consider sharing. Because I think the basic fundamental underlying technologies that drive the network and computing are like the written and spoken languages. They should be free and open. And I always used to complain that Microsoft sort of owned the written and spoken language of computing with Windows. And I said, I'd love to own English. Just the vowels. I just take the vowels. And a couple of few words like Windows and some of the more important words. And just charge people for speaking, reading, writing. Anytime you use an O, that's 0.04 cents. It's not much, but it adds up, doesn't it? No, that's no good. And nobody owns Mandarin. Nobody owns Spanish. And that allows for communication and interoperability. And I think there's a lot of, at all levels, the network levels. I mean, what's the beauty of TCP/IP? We were the first company to put TCP/IP on every computer in the world in 1982. And it was open source and available to everybody. And then a couple years later, we did NFS. And I remember the DEC guys going, that's source code. That's the corporate jewels. And Bill Joy said, what good is a network file system if there's nothing else connected to it? It's like a phone that's not got a wire or wireless connection to anything. Hey, look at my phone. Hi. How am I doing? I'm doing great. You can have a conversation with yourself. That's not very helpful. It wasn't until 1989, I think, or was it 98? I think it was 1998 when Microsoft put IP in Windows, to give you an idea of how quickly they got on the internet bandwagon. So again, open source, if you don't go with the open things, you can end up being Microsoft if you don't open up to the right levels in the right ways. And again, that's why we're doing Curriki with open educational materials. That's one that just seems like a no-brainer for the world. Anybody who wants to donate, Curriki, CURRIKI.org. Every dollar counts. And you can follow me on Twitter if you like some of my rants and raves on golf and hockey and economics and politics and technology. I'm Scott McNealy, at Scott McNealy on Twitter. So I'm trying to get to 10,000 followers too. So retweet my stuff, will you? How much time do we got? Are we doing all right? Right here?
Scott, after the acquisition of Sun by Oracle, what are your thoughts about Oracle's hardware strategies, the XSun hardware, their XLogic and Tradea?
So, very interesting. The deal closed, and in 2 days, I got my notice of resignation, I guess is the right word. So I lasted 2 days, which I think was a paperwork mess up. It took that long. I have never been called by Oracle for any consulting or any other stuff, except twice I've been called to testify in the Java versus Google case. So when they want me to go talk lawsuit against Google, they know how to get a hold of me, but they've never asked me for any other advice. So I don't really know what's going on. I don't talk to anybody. I don't really follow it. I don't spend my time looking in the rearview mirror. I'm too busy doing weigh-in, too busy doing Curriki, too busy consulting for other companies. And I got 4 boys at home. That was the reason I stepped down to begin with. I had 4 startups at home that I wanted to. I was working pretty hard, and my wife was quite tolerant of me, and traveling around the world and coming home jet lagged and doing meetings all weekend. I said, you know what, my boys are 2, 4, 6, and 8. I'm going to go spend some time with them, and I was lucky enough to be able to go do that. So I really don't know what's going on over there. You'll have to ask Larry.
Why don't we look going on? Your thoughts about it?
My thoughts about it? I mean, I thought it was a better deal than IBM in all ways. Financially, for our shareholders, all the rest of it, but most importantly for our employees. Because at IBM, we had the IBM business and the Sun business, and there was complete overlap. Every job we had there was an equivalent job and title and person at IBM. And my thinking was, they don't need just about every, I understood they already had a CEO, that was understood, but do we need to, and at Oracle, there was very little overlap because they weren't in the hardware systems or operating systems business. I think they wanted to take out MySQL, but and maybe added $1 billion or $2 billion to the price they were willing to pay. But so I thought it was a better place for them to land. I haven't really seen them push Open Spark. I haven't seen them push Solaris or open source. Larry doesn't like open source. Sharing was, I think he dropped out of school before he got to the sharing class. So. Yes.
I got 2 kids in college, so I'm buying a lot of those $150 textbooks. So what's it going to take to break the mold? Because I've been watching this whole.
So here's what's going to break the mold on the $150 textbooks, and that is there's a killer feature that curriculum needs, and that killer feature is real-time scoring. We call it gamification. It's real-time scoring with leaderboards. And right now, if you pick up a textbook and watch a kid read it, they go like this, and they fall into the crevice there, and then they wake up a little later and they do a couple more pages, and then they run. And you just go to the library, you'll see them doing this as they grind through 7. Now, watch kids play a video game. They're screaming, they're hopping, they're looking at the thing, and we have a pinball machine that the little gopher comes up and goes, nah, you missed me, right? My kids don't come upstairs and go, the gopher gave me some crap, They want to kill that gopher. They want to get up in the top 10 scores and put their initials in, all the rest of it. It's called real-time scoring. It's called gamification. There's not one textbook that is that way. So as soon as you get these textbooks online, put a leaderboard on there, a national leaderboard with real-time scoring for the questions to find out whether they learn the material. You will have to go to your kids, because our kids are starting to do some of this real-time learning stuff. We have to say, step away from the computer. Put the keyboard down, you're going to bed. And this is without leaderboards. Now once you get leaderboards and the kids can spend 3 hours and say, I passed 37,000 kids my age this evening nationally, and I moved up 2 percentile points in Spanish or in world history or whatever, these kids will go absolutely nuts. They will. Some of them will, right? But we're hurting not the person we're leaving behind, but the people we're holding back. When I was at Harvard a long time ago, before most of you were born, I took one self-paced class. It was statistics, and it was computerized. I started Monday morning. I was done Tuesday night. I hadn't slept, eaten, showered. I bugged the professor the whole way. I got an A- on this thing. And if the entire curriculum at Harvard had been self-paced online, I would have gotten it done in 6 weeks, and Gates, Ballmer, and Jobs and all those other dropouts wouldn't have gotten ahead of me, and I wouldn't be here talking to you right now. So that's all we need. So what we're doing with Curriki is we have these 45,000 learning assets. Look at it as a Lego bucket full of Legos, and we want to build Legoland, and we want to make it all self-paced, online, real-time scored, multimedia, web-enabled, and free.
But if the school districts only approve one book or one new type of media, then I pay $150 for the.
But if the kids can learn, we had 2 things. We had a very serious conversation with our son about not going. My wife and I were both in agreement. Don't go. Don't go. He knows so much already, having gone to Harker, all the rest of it. Anything else he needs to learn, he can learn online. I said, unless you're going to be a deep STEM scientist, science, technology, engineering, math, or a doctor, you can learn everything else you want online. It's all there. And you're ready. I said, go to Denver, work for Huawei, and in 4 years you'll be CEO. That'll save me $500,000, and you'll make that $500,000. And you'll be president. You'll know more than you could possibly know. The whole concept here, it will change very aggressively. So I had another point, I forgot what it was, but It will change. It has to change. It won't change if the government is running it. It really won't. And let's hope we have a tipping point. You know, these things go along, and then all of a sudden, boom. You know, I want to see something like iTunes or Google hit the education system, and that's what we're trying to go do. So. The concept here is if we can get, I wanted to tell the story about, I went to, this is interesting, this is why I'm so down on the DOE. So Secretary Spellings under Bush, I go in and I explain to her curriculum, and I said, I spend $2 billion a year at the Sun quite effectively in R&D. Give me $30 million a year for 5 years. I will build you a complete free open source multimedia web-enabled real-time scored standards compliant K-12 curriculum for $150 million over 5 years, and you will eliminate $15 billion a year in cost. Can you imagine the ROI on that? Have you ever seen an ROI? There's never been an ROI like that. I mean, this is $15 billion a year. What's the net present value of $15 billion? Forever, right? You know what she said? I don't have any money. I give it all away to the states so we can buy votes. I mean, we didn't need any fuel in the airplane. I was so angry. Just had me exhale backwards. So, roll forward, Obama. This guy believes in government, so I'm going to go see him. I go see Arnie Duncan, same thing, same answer. We don't have any money. Go apply for Race for the Top. Race for the Top, just to apply is more money than we've spent putting curricula together, career to date. It's just absolutely ridiculous. So will it change? Not as long as the government's involved, unless we find a way to, you know, cut the legs out from under it and let everybody have a chance, and let, you know, no child, parent or teacher or homeschooler or content creator held back, because we're holding them all back. And you know what? It's the ones we're holding back who are going to be the next Andy Bechtolsheim, or, you know, solve cold fusion or cancer or whatever. It's not the ones we're leaving behind, unfortunately. I don't want to leave anybody behind, but that's the government's job, is to be the safety net. And should the safety net be all students or the bottom 2%? Should the safety net be all eaters, all 50 million food stamp folks, or should it be the bottom 2%? Should we do government health care for all people or the bottom 2%? I think that's the conversation we need to have in America. I'm not against the government doing safety net. I just don't think with a country that has an obesity problem that we have 50 million people on food stamps. And I just don't know how, as our healthcare system gets better, we've doubled the number of people on disability insurance in the last 4 years. That's ridiculous. So, anyhow, I could go on and on about that.
Maybe one last question so we can make sure the Shockey game starts on time today.
Last one in the corner.
If you had to do over again, would you support the acquisition storage tech?
No.
Can you elaborate? Second question.
If I had to do it all over again, I would have not done most acquisitions that we did. The worst was Cobalt, where we bought a $15 million Linux appliance company for, was it $1 or $2 billion? And the 15 million of revenue went to zero very quickly. That was not one of my shining moments. I think the MySQL acquisition was a good one because we had a database problem, but it ended up getting us bought. There was a very good one called Floating Point Systems. We bought their 64-way Spark server for $18 million, and we sold about $4 billion worth of those high-end 64-way Spark machines. Just a total home run. Storage Tech was not bad, but not good. It was just, it did make us the largest employer in Colorado, which is one of the advantages of having moved to Colorado now. There's a good network of, we just promoted to CEO a former Sun exec to run Wayne, so I'm very excited about that. She'll do a great job. So anyhow, thank you all. Scott.McNealy@weighin.com if you want to get a hold of me, or scooter54@me.com if you can remember that. So thank you.
Thank you. We made sure you won't get into trouble with IRS.
Okay, good. I guarantee I'm in trouble, but thank you.